Citizens' concerns?
Tara Fredericks from West Acton. I'm concerned because I look at the master plan and I see some really wonderful things that I feel like aren't being addressed as much as other things. I get the feeling that a lot of staff time is spent processing applications for developers and construction, anything that has building in it, and very little staff time being spent on preservation and conservation, buying additional lands, things that are actually in the master plan, and I hope that y'all address that. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? John, do you have an update for the board?
Yes, thank you. I have 3 updates. The first is I just wanted to remind the public that we will be debuting our modified town hall hours starting July 1st. So we hope you come and visit us on Tuesday evening. We'll be open till 7:30. And we hope you get out of the habit of visiting us after noon on Friday because we will be closed. And we're going to see how that goes for a few months, and we look forward to your feedback. The second item is that the board a few weeks ago authorized me to move forward with the new Acton Power Choice agreement, and we're announcing the agreement that we reached with Constellation Energy. And the details are available online, but I'll hit the high notes. The new Power Choice standard is going to be 10% renewables, which is an increase from last year, and the rate for that will go to 10.985 cents per kilowatt hour. And so that's the standard that everybody's going to be into. The Power Choice option, which is if people that want to go up to 100% green, that's going to be 12.671 cents. And then for those people that aren't interested in either of those, you can opt down to the Power Choice Basic at 10.741 cents. This is available on our website, and I encourage you to check out the rest of the details. The contract starts in September, and if you were in the program previously, you do not need to do anything to stay in it. If you have questions, please contact my office. The next item is we're excited that we're celebrating the 20th anniversary of Narrow Park. It's been a really special place for the community, and the actual anniversary is the 4th of July. I think that was the first big event that was held at the park, and so we're excited that at this next week, or in a few weeks when we're having the fireworks, it'll be the 20th anniversary. We also have a great concert series lined up this year, and to try to generate some buzz for it, our recreation group has put together one fact over the next 20 days. So we have 20 facts to celebrate the 20th anniversary. So if you have any good ones that you want to share with us, we can add to that. But don't forget, 4th of July, the event starts at 5:30. Get there early. There's all kinds of fun things to do there besides fireworks.
John, will there be parking at Nagog and the bus coming around?
We'll have the same program as last year, yes.
And on the 25th of June at the Public Safety, there'll be a forum from the Dog Park Committee. They're looking at 3 potential sites. Okay, Stormwater Management Program Plan.
We have a minute, a brief intermission, and I wondered if you would be willing to look at the consent agenda. And if you are interested, I'd like to offer that there's one item on the consent agenda that is no longer necessary.
Okay.
And that would be item 18.
Okay. So the consent items are 15, Citizen Certificate of Recognition, Bruce Brackman. 16, Board to approve spending request, Acton Community Housing Corporation. 17, Board appointment, Benjamin Blumenthal, MBTA Advisory Board. 19, one-day alcoholic beverage license, Barbara Keela, Nara Park, August 25th, 2019. Item 20, one-day alcoholic beverage license, House Rabbit Network, Nara Park, August 18th, 2019. One-day alcoholic beverage license, Jillian Oman, Nara Park, June 21st, 2019. Item 22, meeting minutes, May 5th, 13th, 28th, and June 3rd. And 23, selectmen reports. Is there a motion?
I move to approve consent items 15 through 17 and 19 through 23.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, a motion made and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Can we take 5?
I think that if we're, all right, we're good.
Over.
Hi, thanks everybody. Sorry for the wait. I'm Selby, I'm the Land Use and Economic Development Director for the town. A little out of breath because I just ran up the stairs. So I'm going to try to make this presentation as brief as I can. This is a presentation about stormwater management and compliance with the new federal law, the new general permit. Does this not advance? Go on? Is there an on button? There we go. On. Got it. So why are we here? Most of you should know, I hope, that back in 2003, the federal government, through the EPA, issued a permit to regulate the non-point source discharges that come out of our stormwater system. It was originally done in 2003, and an updated permit was issued in 2016 with an effective date of this July, July of 2018. So what the MS4 is, and there's another slide about this, it's our storm drain system. So it's the system that conveys stormwater and snow melt through a series of drains, pipes, and eventually it outfalls into our wetlands and waterways. The consequences of stormwater is pollution. Unfortunately, this is the largest amount of pollution that we get these days into our waterways is actually from stormwater. Carries the pollutants listed here. And as it says, it is the largest remaining source of pollution in our nation's waterways. Again, the MS4 stands for Municipal Separate Storm Sewer System. So it's not part of our sanitary sewer system, but it's a separate system that just conveys stormwater when it falls in the ground into our rivers and streams. So about our drainage system, we have about 80 miles of pipe, 4,000 catch basins, those storm drains you see on the ground in the roads, 1,600 manholes, and about 600 discharge points or outfalls. The MS4 permit is an unfunded federal mandate. It comes out of the 1972 Clean Water Act from a 1987 amendment that addressed point source pollution. This is actually non-point source pollution. So this is the phase 2. In phase 1, they were targeting the cities. Phase 2, they're targeting all the rest of the urbanized areas throughout the country. In the state of Massachusetts, it's administered by the EPA, not the DEP. Failure to comply results in fines. So it's something that we do have to take seriously and we do have to address. The permit prescribes 6 primary control measures. They're on the board. I'll run through them fairly quickly. Public education, if anybody has a dog, you would have seen a letter from the town within the last couple of months that reminded you to properly dispose of your dog waste. This is one of the larger contributors to stormwater pollution is dog waste. Public involvement. We put together a stormwater management plan, which was email blasted out, loaded onto our website, and we're actively seeking feedback. That's why I'm here tonight. The largest changes to this new permit came in this section of the permit, the illicit discharge detection and elimination. Luckily, because our sewers are new in Acton, this isn't a huge issue for us, although we do still have some illicit discharges. Anything that's not stormwater is considered an illicit discharge. One example, about 2 years ago, we received a complaint about an odor of diesel fuel coming from an outfall next to a person's house. We investigated it and found that a sump pump was illegally connected into the MS4, and their oil line had a crack in it. So groundwater, oil-contaminated groundwater, was being discharged into that stream on a daily basis until we found and addressed the problem. It's construction site runoff, so this is all the hay bales and silt fences you see when you go around town and you see construction sites. Post-construction stormwater management are the best management practices that they have to install to manage stormwater long-term once the construction is done. And then good housekeeping and pollution prevention. This is public works, street sweeping, cleaning the catch basins, etc. So the timeline, this permit was effective July of 2018. We submitted our notice of intent in September, and we've been working with consultants to develop the SWIMP, the Stormwater Management Program Plan. And this is what the document looks like. It's available on the website. If you go to actonma.gov/stormwater, it'll bring you up to a web page that will have all of our stormwater information located there, including this plan, and we are actively asking for input on this plan. What's next? We're going to continue to implement the plan. We'll take feedback and comments and incorporate those into the document as we move forward. It's a 10-year program, and we're going to start addressing all the inspections of the outfalls in the coming years. Any questions? Great, thank you for your time.
Dean, any questions? John?
No questions.
David? Peter? Oh, here we go. Questions?
Yes. Tara Fredericks, West Acton. And I want to, this is a question relative to reality. It's a fake news fact check. And somebody told me that the MS4 program was canceled at the federal level and that it's been picked up by the state at the state level. I just want to confirm my understanding of that, if it's true.
In most states, this program is administered by it would be the DEP, but in the state of Massachusetts, it's still administered by the EPA.
Okay, I heard that at an MAPC meeting that the state's going to be picking it up if Trump actually cancels it. My second question is relative to the indexing on the agenda. It says 3A and B, and it looks like the B is to adopt changes to the site plan, special permit rules, and regulation. And my first question on that is that only relative to the Chapter X bylaw implementation, or is it for other things in the site plan, special permit rules, and regulations?
Yeah, I can answer that. It's just stormwater.
Thank you. And I will also register my concern that the site plan, special permit rules, and regulations, I don't believe ever had the 90-day public comment period, and I believe that we should be reviewing that for consistency with the master plan at some time in the near future. And that was me. Oh, yes, and the last thing is that on 257 Central, the application, special permit application for the duplex, in that I found a memo that said something to the effect that that parcel was exempt from the Chapter X bylaw, which it's my understanding that Chapter X requires any building to keep, so that the subsequent building, the result of the building, keeps all the water on the property unless it gets a special permit to discharge water off of the property. And I found this memo saying that it was exempt from it or didn't have to do it because of there's a small driveway, and I thought, that's kind of weird. So I'd like to just get, if anybody knows the answer to that. Thank you.
Yeah, so the Chapter X stormwater bylaw has thresholds for when it applies, and it has exemptions. So for single-family homes or any development, if the thresholds are an acre of disturbance, 5,000 square feet of impervious area, 5,000 square feet of disturbance on a 10% slope, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So we put it back on the design engineer to come up with those numbers, and then we verify them, and then if they're under those numbers, then the bylaw doesn't apply.
Thank you.
Okay. No questions on the board? Do we have a motion to adopt the changes to Chapter X?
I'd like to talk about that real quick for you. So the Chapter X, so in the agenda, there's two changes. There's site plan special permit changes and the Chapter X rules and regulations. So Chapter X is the stormwater bylaw for the town of Acton going back. And at town meeting, we adopted some changes that kind of makes that bylaw the overall stormwater, permit authority for Acton. So now every board has been adopting changes to their rules to kind of just point back to Chapter X. So in the site plan special permit changes, all you see there are, instead of specific technical requirements in there, it just says, do a design that's compatible with Chapter X. So site plan special permit, there's not much change, it just points to Chapter X. The Chapter X changes, these are pretty significant from when we adopted rules 2-3 years ago. And that's because we had to make some changes for our MS4 permit. And there were some changes that I just thought made sense to adapt for climate change and things like that. So, and then you're also voting in the change to make the implementing authority. It was the land use department. We're recommending the DPW be the permit authority for the stormwater Chapter X. And I have one amendment from the draft you guys have. I sent it to Lisa, she has electronically, but in section 3.4.6.5, I'd like it to say, TSS removal documentation shall be provided.
Let us find it.
Okay, sorry. 3.4.6.5. Oh, sorry, page 11. Should have just done that, sorry.
Oh, I got it. Okay.
So the TSS removal, I'd like to remove the references to the 2 and 25-year storm event. Those are superfluous. They don't, the state doesn't really require that. So I'd like it to say documentation shall be provided demonstrating the required TSS removal, which Acton has a more strict standard than the state anyways, and this 2 and 25-year is a superfluous addition, so I'd like to remove that. And then on page 17.
Just hold on page 11, so that sentence would read, documentation shall be provided demonstrating TSS removal rates, period?
Demonstrating the required TSS removal. So in Acton, we have 1 inch in the groundwater protection zone. The first inch of rainwater has to be treated for removing. TSS means total suspended solids. So all the things that go into the MS4 that cause all the pollution, it's all really in that first inch of rainwater. So that's why Acton adopted a strict 1 inch standard. By saying 2 and 25, that's saying you have to treat for a 6 inch storm, which is impossible. So it's a 1 inch is what is more than the state, and it's just not it's a superfluous addition.
So the sentence would read then, documentation shall be provided demonstrating the required TSS removal rates.
Correct, right there.
Period.
Period.
So for flow rates, that all goes out.
Yeah.
And the second?
On page 17. Under section 3.4.13.5, site improvements. The second tab, setbacks. I would like to just change the word required to recommended. I wrote this in here, adopting it from the Mass State Handbook, and the Mass State Handbook says that these setbacks are recommended, they're not required. So I'd just like to match what's at the state level.
Okay?
Yep, and that's it for amendments from what you see in the draft. So again, these changes just meets our MS4 requirement. It gives us a higher standard in Acton for climate change. It consolidates all of our stormwater into one set of rules and regs. Whether you're in front of the Conservation Commission or you're in front of the Planning Board, just one set of standards. And then you're changing the implementing authority from land use to public works.
Any questions from the board? All set? Okay,
Thanks, that's a lot, I know. Thank you.
yeah. Kim?
Hi, I'm Kim Castens. I live at 294 Pope Road. I am the chair of the Green Acton Water Committee and a Green Acton director. So in the lead up to town meeting, when we were getting ready to vote on the changes to the bylaws that were preparatory to this, Mr. Campbell came and met with us for an entire evening and went through, briefed us on the stormwater situation and the plans that he had proposed at the time. And then the water committee went carefully through a prior draft of this set of changes, both changes that you're being asked to vote on. And on the basis of that discussion and document review, the Green Acton directors voted to recommend that town meeting pass the two relevant bylaws that were town meeting articles 39 and 40, and also that the Board of Selectmen vote in favor of these two changes that you're being asked to make tonight to the Chapter 10 Rules and Regulations and to the Site Plan Special Permitting Regulation. The documents that were on the DocuShare are slightly different from what Green Acton directors had to consider at the time that we took our consensus agreement in favor, but the new version is compatible with what Green Acton had approved previously.
Thank you.
Tara Fredericks, West Acton. I am also a director of Green Acton. I don't remember, I guess I should ask Kim, are the amendments that Paul
Is there a question
sorry,
for us?
Yes, are the amendments that are being proposed in line with the Green Acton statement? I guess they're not going to be able to answer that, but I would like you to ask for Kim to speak on that because
She just said so.
so I didn't hear you say that the amendments that he was just proposing are in line with, okay. So I'm getting a nod. And so it's my understanding that while the state requirements might be a certain something that we want to have more strict requirements locally. And so I feel like relieving something in this draft to make it easier or less stringent, I think would be a mistake. And so I also feel like proposing amendments, at a meeting like this, I feel like we need time to review the amendments in writing as opposed to just being read them for the audience's purpose. For example, the 25-year, is the 25-year more strict than the state? Is it as strict as the state? Is it less strict than what we voted on at town meeting? Is it as strict as we could make it? I'd like to get some answers on that.
So I wrote these regs with looking at everything that existed in a bylaw from Acton, and then I looked at the state requirements, and then I also looked at the federal requirements. Whatever the lowest standard was amongst those three, that's what I incorporated into these rules. So some of these that I wrote here superfluously created a new standard that wasn't in a bylaw or in a state reg or a federal reg. So this 2 and 25-year removal, right now in your zoning bylaw, you have a groundwater protection zone that you have to treat the first inch. Adopting this in a rule and reg would make you treat 5 inches I don't intend to require than what was already voted by in the bylaw and adopted by town meeting.
So just to confirm what I think I heard, that the proposed amendments makes it a less strong or weaker protection of the environment?
Okay,
But in my opinion, not as strong as it could be. Thank you.
all right. Is there a motion on Chapter X?
I would move that we accept the amendments to Chapter X as described in the document and as amended on the floor.
Is there a second? Motion made and seconded. Any discussion?
Yeah, I just have one very minor comment. It looks like in the rules and regulations for site plans, there's a typo in the table of contents on page 2. 3.6 still says drainage calculations. That was deleted and stormwater runoff was substituted, so you just need to make that minor change. Okay.
Can we vote on the stormwater
I think he moved
management?
both of them.
Oh, he only moved the stormwater.
And my motion was just the Chapter X.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, well,
That's fine, yeah.
I thought I heard both documents. That's okay. I don't have any comments on Chapter X.
All right. All in favor of adopting the stormwater management as amended on the floor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those in favor?
Aye. We said all those in favor again?
Whether we just do,
Oh,
we're voting on A.
Wait, I understand, she said all those in favor again.
Okay, again.
Yeah.
You see, you-
I didn't hear.
Aye.
All right. Anyone opposed? Motion carries. All right, now site plan. Do you have any comment on this, Paul?
Yeah, Peter, I think we just changed drainage calculations to be more specific, saying, here's your stormwater runoff responsibilities versus just what calculations they have to provide.
Right,
You know,
I'm fine with that. The
Yeah.
title to the paragraph is
okay.
is stormwater calculations. It's not drainage calculations.
Oh, okay,
So
okay.
I was just saying, change the
Change it.
language to be consistent with the title that's
That makes
on
sense.
that page.
Yeah, those planning that, no, I won't blame planning. I'm just kidding.
So 3.6 would be stormwater calculations.
Actually, stormwater runoff is the title to the paragraph 3.6.
And the change is just to the table of contents.
Right.
Any other questions or comments on the site plan?
No.
Okay. Is there a motion?
I move that we accept the changes to the rules and regulations, site plan special permits that were distributed today as amended.
Is there a
Second.
Motion made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Selby. Okay, Water Resource Advisory Committee.
Sorry, I'm losing my voice here for some reason. Thanks a lot for putting us on the agenda. My name is Ron Beck from 80 Estabrook Road, and I'm the chairman of the Water Resources Advisory Committee. Barry Rosen is here also from the committee. I think the other 3 members, permanent members of our committee, weren't able to make it this evening. But I'll try to be relatively brief, and I sent this out, I guess, late yesterday, so hopefully people had a chance to at least scan this and maybe read the Word document I sent out. But I'll go through this fairly briefly. I just wanted to say before we get started that I'd like to thank all the members of the committee and a few regular visitors to the meetings. I think we've met on this for almost a year, almost every, at least once a month. So there's a lot of dedicated effort. I'd also like to thank Joan for she's made almost every meeting, so that was extremely helpful also. And I'd like to thank all of you, or most of you, who were serving at the time for attending the September workshop we had around water. So this is coming out of the September workshop, September 2018, that we held. We facilitated, we invited a number of town boards and committees. So I'd like to thank everyone who spent about a half a day there. And we have a lot of documentation there. Following this, we were going to send out a note to everybody who participated, basically giving an update on where we are and giving them we have a spreadsheet with everybody's remarks from the day listed. So I think a couple people at least had come into that workshop a little bit skeptical as to where we were headed, just because there had been a lot of discussion of water over about a 2-year period, which had gotten a little contentious at times. But I think everybody who attended came out, I think the feedback we got was very positive, that it was a very collaborative meeting and a lot of agreement on points were made. So we spent the time from then until now to turn that into some actionable things. So that's what I'd like to talk about today. So just to recap, in spring 2017, there were 3 water articles at the town meeting. They were unanimously accepted. They were non-binding, but one of them recommended that the town work on a long-term water plan. So in 2018, we facilitated a water workshop. We got an outside facilitator for that. We've spent most of the time between then and now synthesizing the results and figuring out what's the most practical, doable, and useful path forward that we could do that would add value to yourselves and the whole town. Also, I just wanted to note that water has been in the goals of the Board of Selectmen now, but also last year, so I think this is consistent with that. So what we're proposing, and the Word document sort of outlines it, is that we get approved by yourselves or affirmed to continue to work on developing a long-term water plan for the town. We're just naming it for default purposes, Acton Water 2050. Now, it seems like a long time from now, but I think one of the definite things that's come out of this is that, Acton Water District definitely does planning, but it's mostly short-term. So every 5 years, I believe, they have to renew their operating plan. But there really hasn't been a process to develop a long-range plan. So that's what this is proposing. I think what came out of that workshop is there are a lot of questions that need answers. There's a lot of data most of the data needed to answer those exists. It's mostly a matter of putting it together into the right form. And so that's really what this is proposing. And just to be clear, the fact that we're talking about looking out around 25 to 30 years doesn't mean we think we can project things exactly, but it's just a planning horizon. So there are 4 main tasks we propose. So this is what we propose. So we've divided it into 2 phases, and the first phase, there's a timeline on the next slide. So probably the most important thing that came out is at various levels, people are relatively need education, all of us. There's something we can all learn, but everybody's in their own little part of it, but nobody's really seeing the whole picture. So putting together education is really important. It's also important in terms of, in fact, you just voted in these Section X changes and some rule changes. And there were some comments, but I mean, the real issue is, can you enforce any of those? And really, enforcement of anything is based on education and people being aware and sort of voluntarily complying is a lot better than having to go around and enforce. So education's a big thing. I think the second main task here we propose for phase one is what we call a common vision for Acton's water future. So this is where I think a lot of the discussions come in, and we're trying to put together as much as possibly a totally fact-based approach here, where we look at both the demand, how much water will be needed, and supply, how much water is likely to be available, and what are the risks, in other words, future pollution risks and so forth. And therefore, so in phase one, we would develop one future scenario, which we would call the base case or the as-is case, business as usual. And then the hope would be, assuming we also inventory all the information that exists in phase one. The hope would be if we have enough information, we end up with 2 to 3 scenarios ultimately in the second phase. So look at both a higher growth scenario and a lower growth scenario and the as-is scenario, just to give everybody an envelope of what the town, the decisions you could make in the future can be accommodated. And then phase two, we have come up with the idea of what we call a policy decision-making matrix, which would be look at the types of decisions you might make, like a special permit or let's say a large 40B project, or let's say Kelly's Corner projects. And what would be the things you need to think about when you make that decision, and where the information sources are, and what the best way to think about it as you make those decisions. So that's really probably the main outcome that will be, I think, answer a lot of people's questions. If you could think of it as putting a lot of information into one place, some of it's in the water district, some of it's in different files in the town and so forth and so on. Some of it is in the regional planning agency, some of it's at the state and so forth. And then propose some metrics that we could use for ongoing reporting. So let's say it would get reported at the annual report that people get when they go to the town meeting, so they see if things are getting better or worse, or how things stand. So that's roughly what we propose. Here's a timeline. So our goal would be to give back to you a report right around the time of the next spring town meeting, where we stand, what we've learned from phase one, and then get comments and so forth, and then finalize it during the summer there, and then start phase two in the fall, and hopefully finish it by early 2021. And you can see one of the first phases here is outreach and education, one of the first aspects. And just the main thing I wanted to note here is, so we came up with the notion of something called stakeholder interviews. So, and this would actually be our main request from the town staff for the initial help we want, which would be basically about an hour, hour and a half of different people's time for us to have a conversation and understand what information is available and what the views are of that department, and what questions they have, or what things they have to offer, and what they think they should be doing or can't do right now, or want someone else to be doing, and so forth. Yeah, so this is the timeline. Any questions so far? Or maybe I'll just go through to the end and then take the questions, because I sort of know what the questions will be. So it's better if I finish, I guess. What did I do here? Okay. So resources required. So our approach to this is, our goal is to try to do this without spending a lot of town money, but we think some is required. And if for no other reason, it's important to have some outside person sort of vet what we're doing to make sure it's fact-based. And because some of the previous discussions around water have gotten a little polarized at times, I think it would be really valuable to have someone from the outside review everything, structure it, make sure we're on a straight path to something most likely to gain consensus. So, after some, we honestly don't know exactly what we would have somebody do, but we wanted the town budget and yourselves to think about that. We're thinking that it would probably be somewhere between $25,000 to $50,000, maybe over 2 fiscal years, that would be required of outside consultant time. And we're thinking that if we can continue to use the same facilitator, if we have some public outreach meetings, that resource actually was free to us last time, because the person who did it works for the National Park Service, and the Park Service wanted her to basically provide that time as something the Park Service offered up, because they have a vested interest as well, because they, manage the Sudbury River area. And then, but then this would really be necessitate significant volunteer hours from ourselves. So basically what we're saying is if the town would offer up some modest support for an outside consultant to make sure that what we do is, fact-based and so forth, the current members of the committee and hopefully a couple new volunteers, that some of which are in the process of applying to join the committee as associate members, we'd be willing to put in significant volunteer time under that structure. And then we need to still, I think, consult with John and the town staff to understand what he could offer in terms of some reasonable level of help from one or maybe a couple of people who would put in just some reasonable amount of hours to help us, mostly attending meetings and facilitating getting resources. So that's sort of the structure that we propose, and obviously ongoing support from the Board of Selectmen, Joan, or if she chooses to turn it over to somebody else. But it's fantastic to have her attending, but she always has a good, fresh viewpoint on it. And then we definitely need to have a complete complement of associate members. So at the moment, Barry is doing double duty. He's now on the Acton Water Board, whatever you call it, Board of Supervisors. And so he's now doing 2 things. And so, we can't automatically assume all of us will be able to continue, but so we need to have the associate members, but we're trying to facilitate the recruitment process as well. So that's what so questions?
I think it all seems pretty reasonable, but I'd certainly like to get some input from the town manager as far as the commitment of staff time, and certainly the $50,000 ask. I presume that would be something that would be factored into the budget deliberations for next year.
Excuse me, yes, thank you. If there is a resource needed to further this effort, it would likely be something that we would want to bring forward in '21. This is a long-term goal. What was a goal last year? There was a goal related to water, as you mentioned, and there's a long-term goal, as you know, this year to evaluate and implement recommendations from the Water Resource Advisory Committee report. So with that direction, I could make resources available.
Yeah, in the short term, do you see any issues with providing access to town staff to get some of this started?
Yeah, I think that a lot of us were at the meeting that Saturday morning last year, and I think it was a great session, and I think it was a very informative, and we got a lot out of it. There are a lot of ongoing initiatives that we're working on now that are very closely related to this effort. So I think it would take some coordination, but I'm happy to facilitate that.
Ron, thank you for your work and presentation tonight. Given that the Acton Water District is a separate entity and they're statutorily charged with the sourcing and delivery of water to the town, I think it would be appropriate for a joint public meeting of the selectmen and the 3 water commissioners, and bringing in staff on both sides for a fuller discussion of the recommendations. And, I would like to do that, pretty soon. That we don't.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. Just 2 thoughts on that. One is, as you probably know, Matt Mosteller is a member of the committee.
Mm-hmm.
So, and he's one of the main staff at the Water District. So he's been very actively developing this with us, over the last few months and weeks. So I think it's fair to say he's fully supportive, but I think a joint meeting is definitely warranted. And I also believe, didn't go to the meeting, but I believe there was a meeting of the Water District Board, or what do you call it, the commissioners, right, where they had actually voted that if such an effort like this was to take place, they would want to contribute to it and actively participate as well.
Yeah, I think that's crucial.
Right.
They've got to be on board
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
buy in.
Yeah, so I think a meeting would be good, yeah.
So we don't come up with something good and they say, what did you do this for?
Right.
So if we could put.
So I think their thought, I didn't go to the meeting, but I think their thought was, whatever it was, if they put some skin in the game, as it were,
Sure.
it would make everybody committed to working together pretty much, so.
Thank you, Ron. When you talk about a vision of demand and supply,
Right.
Other than a volume of water in and out in some ranges and things like that, excuse me, are there other things that you expect to have in that vision? I mean, I'm not asking for the answers. I'm asking for the range of, things that are.
Yeah, so I think there's, well, we put the word vision, and maybe it's a view or a picture or something like that. But I think there's 3 or 4 parts. Okay, there's how much water we have recharging into the system we have. There's how much water we use. And then there's questions about how much we'll need in the future. So that depends on how much development you allow and so forth. There's also since we get all of our water from groundwater, that largely gets recharged within Acton. Some of it comes from upstream, like from Littleton. But so then the actions the town takes in terms of protection of sources, and that's, by the way, what Matt is always making sure we put into this, that, what the Water District is concerned about is they can control the production. They can't control the protection, because that's in your purview. That's why this is sort of a joint thing. So that's an important part of the vision. Do we have specific places where we want to protect the land specifically because of the recharge we need? And then there's the other issue of different types of development and what sort of pollutant risks they could create, such as that Insulet project where at the time it was proposed, nobody thought they were going to be using much water, but all of a sudden it turned out they were going to have a production facility where they were going to be using fairly large quantities of water that weren't anticipated. So it's mostly these external factors and and then the other question is, which the Water District plans for also are studies. So Barry used to run I guess you're still on it, or I don't know if you can do both. You had to resign. Yeah. So there's a committee very much like ours that reports to the Water District called WILMAC, and they wrote a report about 6 or 7 years ago, maybe a little longer than that now, where they looked at the issues. And one of the things they looked at is, okay, today we get all the water from groundwater, but were there alternate sources of supply if we got our groundwater polluted? So those are parts of the vision. Would you ever consider connecting to, and then the costs. So the cost, everybody's got their water mug here from the Water District. They do a good job of advertising it. So, but we just take it for granted that it's clean. Well, we just had to approve, the Water District had to approve a new treatment plant. That introduces a cost. So every development we approve here generates tax revenues, it also generates costs to the water district if they have to do more treatment of the water. So those are just all balancing acts. It's all part of it.
So I would, from what you said, I would call it kind of, I have no problem with the word vision, but concerns and recommendations, right? Things that you're concerned about and things that you might recommend.
Yeah, I mean,
based on-
so, I don't know, that we, you know, you can, I guess our first step here is we want the approval to move ahead. I think, we haven't actually discussed this specifically, but just for myself, I think our goal here is, we want to make recommendations that are fact-based or
Sure.
alternatives. We don't want to recommend a course of action. That's for you to decide on, right? So we want to present information. I would say it's present the options. And then any recommendations would need to come from the citizens or from the Board of Selectmen or the town staff or the water district.
Okay, very good, thank you.
Yeah, just a quick question. You got, I may have missed this, a healthy group of RAC associate members. We're reappointing committee members tonight. We're looking at all the committees and possibly combining some or whatever. Are you missing associate members now?
Yeah, I don't think we have any.
We're missing 2.
Yeah, so.
Okay. How large is your committee?
We have Ron,
We have one.
Ron Parenti, who used to be the, who's going through the VCC right now.
Okay.
Who's would be great addition.
Yeah.
He was on the Water Commissioners for a
Okay.
while.
How big is your committee?
5 of us, and then,
Okay.
you know. So, and then out of the 5, you know, Matt works for the Water District, so he comes in the evening to the meetings. And you have Barry, who's now doing 2 things. But
Okay.
we're all committed, but, yeah, so that's what we have. So it'd be great to have 2 associates. Sure.
Thank you, Ron. I had Matt speak to the garden club at the public safety facility, and I was amazed at how much questioning there was and how much information was shared. And some of these people have lived in town a long time and didn't know, you know, certain things about the water situation. So I think this whole issue of education is really important. Is there a motion to?
Well, I would move that we, in short order, hold a joint meeting with the water commissioners and members of the Acton. Let me just do it again. I would move then that in short order, next month, we hold a joint public meeting of the Select Board and the water commissioners and staff members from both groups to more fully discuss the recommendations in the RAC report.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Ambulance rates?
Thank you. We periodically review our fees and rates that we charge for services, and we're recommending that the board consider an increase in our ambulance billing rates to be reflective of the rates that are being charged in other communities in our region, and primarily with the Central Mass Emergency Response Association, which is the medical program we were formerly a part of, and we base our rate structure on how they've done it and how they're doing it, and they're increasing their rates on July 1st, and the chief and I are recommending that Acton do the same.
So ALS 1, ALS 2, and BLS, what are those, John?
Those are just different tiers in services being provided, and the billing rates are typically covered by insurance, and the town has a hardship program that we administer through our billing company for people who are treated who have hardships.
Questions? Peter?
Does the insurance pay the full amount, or is this like doctor's bills or hospital bills, where they just have their own rate and they discount them?
I generally believe that they pay the full amount, but I think everybody has different health insurance plans, so some may cover all of it, some may cover some of it, but I think we think that they're primarily paid by Medicare.
Okay.
David?
I just wanted to say that BLS is basic life support and ALS is advanced life support, but I don't know what the difference is between 1 and 2.
Dean?
Yeah, the changes in rates, are we just basically trying to stay in tune with Samara, or do we have some documentation that proves that our costs of doing business have increased by this amount?
Our cost of doing business increases annually, and I think we try to keep our rates competitive. And I think if we were charging more than our neighboring communities, I would be concerned. But I think we try to be consistent with our neighboring communities.
Thank you.
John? Is there a motion?
I move to adopt the rates as listed.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you.
Update on the Kmart parcel.
Yes. This would be my Kmart update 2. On Monday, June 3, I learned from a local real estate developer that Stop and Shop was soliciting offers for the Kmart parcel under the header Call for Offers 615. Immediately, I forwarded the listing sheet to John Mangiarotti, and in turn, John sent the listing sheet to the 4 other select board members. John reached out to Frank Maglio, the director of real estate development at Stop and Shop, to learn what was going on. Mr. Maglio was the individual John and I met with on May 3 to open a dialogue on how the town and Stop and Shop might work together on the redevelopment of the Kmart parcel. Mr. Maglio reported that the Call for Offers 615 was initiated by Stop and Shop's asset management group, not the real estate development unit. There are several redevelopment scenarios for potential buyers. One, a buyer renews or extends a lease with Kmart. Second, a buyer replaces Kmart with tenants such as Wegmans, Target, Junior Walmart, Kohl's, Dick's, Bed and Bath, and Home Goods, and the like, or a combination of those stores. A third, a buyer plans a new retail development. This would require an extensive site plan review. In this scenario, a buyer would likely seek an option to purchase from Stop and Shop while the site plan review is undertaken. And a fourth is where a buyer plans housing. In this scenario, the buyer would need to come before town meeting to seek a zoning change. As with the third scenario, the buyer would require an option to purchase from Stop and Shop. With Stop and Shop inviting offers on the Kmart parcel, the Select Board held a properly noticed executive session on Thursday evening, June 13, to discuss the possible purchase of the Kmart parcel. It was the unanimous consensus of the board not to attempt the purchase of the property at this time. In coming to that consensus, board members expressed concern over the cost to taxpayers of the pending Twin School and the North Acton Fire Station projects, and purchasing the parcel without knowing the proposed use or what to do with it. Town council advised recent eminent domain case law holds that a taking for a public purpose can't be to prevent development a town doesn't like. Ms. Pickering Cook added the town should avoid taking property by eminent domain and then deciding what to do with it. With the chair's permission, I would like to turn it over to John Mangiarotti for further updates on the parcel.
I think that pretty much covers it. We don't have any additional information at this time.
Thanks. Comments? Peter?
Yeah, from my involvement in this in the past, I was just under the impression, I don't know if Stop and Shop or the prior developer we worked with communicated this, but I didn't think that Kmart was interested in renewing their lease. I thought it was a foregone conclusion that they would let it expire. Sears is in bankruptcy. They own Kmart. I suppose they can come out of bankruptcy and continue to operate, but that was my understanding. I don't know how accurate that is, actually.
If I may, Stop and Shop had notified Sears, I believe it was in the spring, it was before the Sears bankruptcy, sufficiently in advance of the Sears bankruptcy, that they did not intend to renew and extend the lease on the parcel when it expired. I thought it was in April of 21. From the listing sheet, it appears to be November of 21. And I don't think the Sears bankruptcy has fully played out yet.
Okay, well, I suppose it is possible if somebody makes an offer, they could open negotiations again with Kmart to try to keep them there if they felt that was what they wanted to do. Okay.
Anyone else?
Hi, Barry Rosen. I'm wondering, John, can I speak to John? John?
Yes.
John, is there another possibility that a developer looking at a 40B could obtain that property?
Well, two positive developments for the town. We are on the verge of achieving a 2-year safe harbor. The hang-up is the State Department of Housing and Community Development didn't do an appraisal that they needed to do, which they're undertaking with all deliberate speed. It's a question of when the 2-year safe harbor would begin. Would it be back to April 9th when the town clerk date stamped the ZBA approval, or would it be a little later date when their appraisal gets done? We have tried to get an answer on that narrow question, and we've been stymied. They may not know either. And then the other good piece that we have is the Powder Mill 40B project came back online. Maynard is out of it, so it would be all Acton. And the developer expanded the project by adding a 4th floor. That would add 45 more units. So instead of 180, it's 225. All 225 would go towards our 10% count. That would put us over the 10% count based on the 2010 census. And on our projected numbers, for the 2020 census, it should put us in relatively easy striking distance of going over the 2020 number, and that will get us to 2030. The projects we're looking at are 446 Mass Avenue and 348, 364 Main Street. So, all is good on that front. It looks that way, yeah. Move it. Thank you.
Bob Van Meter, West Acton. I wanted to express my agreement that the town should not consider buying it, but I also think that the town should initiate at the earliest possible moment an active citizen involvement charrette process to talk about visions for the site that could perhaps influence the potential development of the site. Personally, I believe that a mixed-use project that includes both housing, affordable and market rate, and retail would best complement the vision of a walkable urban place that we are moving toward in Kelly's Corner.
Thank you.
Tara Fredericks, West Acton, and Bob may have forgotten to say that he's a developer that builds such developments. I agree, though, at the idea of a charrette group to include people that live there and various interest groups. Thank you, John, for doing this work. So I really appreciate that close contact with the owner of the parcel. And I think it's important for people to understand that there's on the corporate side, there's the people that own the assets that often will buy or sell the asset, and then the group that develops the real estate. And I think it's important for us to be in contact with both. It's my understanding from talking to the Kmart manager that they would love to renew the lease, that this particular Kmart in Acton is one of the top 10 profitable in the whole Kmart portfolio. And if anybody's in bankruptcy, I think that that's a great thing to have that cash coming in. I think the judges would agree, the bankruptcy judges who want the cash to come in to preserve the vendors, all the liabilities. And then I want to understand, and maybe this isn't the place, but at some point I'd like to understand how much of a detailed plan is required if we want to take a conservative approach to making an offer to the Stop and Shop. So in other words, I totally respect that the case law relative to taking a parcel preemptively to avoid something, and I don't think that anybody kind of wants that. I think the people who want to buy it anyways have this idea of what they want as opposed to not necessarily what they don't want. So I feel like I want to know how detailed a plan. So if we get a charrette group together and we prepare a proposed plan, how detailed would that plan have to be? And I don't need that right now. I was just curious, and thank you very much. I really appreciate that.
Okay, we don't have to take any action, right? Okay, Acton-Boxborough Regional School District for a special town meeting?
So we, as you all know, the school district is working on a MSBA funded school project, and the way the schedule's lined up, they're looking to hold a special town meeting in both communities this winter, and then follow it immediately with a special town election. And they've requested that the board consider calling one on their behalf on December 10th, and have the election a week later on December 17th. And as we may have mentioned earlier, we are also working on the proposed North Acton Fire Station to align it with this timeline to provide an opportunity for us to, if the board so chooses, to also include that in that meeting. So that's the request before you tonight.
Okay. Is there any problem with the schedule?
No, it's their building, so it kind of works out that they. And I think we've talked to town clerk's office, and it's a busy time of year for everyone, but I think we can do it.
Okay. David?
I just want to say I attend the school committee meetings. From the school committee's point of view, the timelines for this are very tight. So they didn't give the two towns very much latitude here. But
anyone else? Ann?
Ann Chang, South Acton. I'd also like to add the possibility of having a sewer article on the same warrant. And I would like, because it may be tied in with the school construction, or it may not be. It's not clear just yet, and we won't know until October. And I would also like to have the sewer article first, because once you have the school article and the people vote, everybody will leave and nobody will be there for either the sewer or the West Acton Fire Station. So I think the selectmen should be very cognizant of the fact of the kinds of people that will be coming to the meeting and what the biggest kinds of participation that you might like for other articles rather than just the schools.
Thank you. Peter?
Yeah, I just want to mention in terms of funding for the sewers, it's town meeting's decision, but if town meeting decides the same as they have in the past, it would just be the residents in the West Acton Sewer District who would be responsible for paying off the bonds to build that system. I think town meeting does have the ability to spread it across the entire town, but the last time we did this, they just put the debt on the sewer district residents. So that's just a.
That's true. Acton has one of the distinctions of being one of the only communities in the whole country where the sewers are paid for solely by the users. But you also need town meeting approval to have that go forward.
Okay. John, do you want us to call the meeting?
Yes, the request is from the school district for you to consider calling the meeting, and I think it's a good idea.
Yeah, I'll make a motion that we call a special town meeting for December 10th, 2019, and a special election for December 17th, 2019. David mentioned the tight timelines here. The MSBA is on schedule now to approve the final design in October. And these decisions have to be made by the town within 45 days, I think, after that. So that's why 120? Okay.
Without
okay.
a tight construction stage.
Yeah, okay. So that'd be December, so.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, motion made and seconded. All those in favor of calling a special town meeting and special election December 10th and December 17th?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion carries. Age-restricted development at 361 Great Road. Nancy?
Is it all right if I give an introduction to this? Okay, thank you. Nancy Tavernier, Chairman of the Acton Community Housing Corporation, and with me tonight is Mark O'Hagan, who has a proposal for the town. What I want to explain to you briefly is what's new and different about doing 40Bs now going forward. We normally have a standard review process that we've had for years that we follow and encourage developers to do LIPs, also known as friendly 40Bs. So normally a developer will come to ACHC and then we'll go through the preliminary review. He will go to a department head gathering and generally a public information session for the town boards and public. And then we would make a recommendation and send him on to the Board of Selectmen to present there and make a recommendation. And if both boards agreed, we would each sign the LIP application, and that would go off to DHCD, be reviewed by them, come back as a letter of eligibility for the project, and then be taken to the Zoning Board of Appeals at that point. What's different this time, and that process takes time and takes the expenditure of funds by the developer to do the engineering and the design work and legal review and so forth. So what's different now is that we are on the verge of reaching safe harbor in the next several months. In order to do that, we have to produce 85 units in 1 calendar year to get 2 years of safe harbor, or 42 units in a calendar year to get 1 year of safe harbor. And what this does is it allows the ZBA to have the option of whether to hear a 40B or not. They have to decide within 15 days of an application coming to them. an application doesn't come to them unless they've gone through all that preliminary work ahead of the application. So not only does the safe harbor allow a ZBA to deny a comp permit, but the town, in addition, must have a current and certified housing production plan that must be updated every 5 years, and I understand you approved our spending request. Thank you. Our current one runs out a year from now. So in March, in anticipation of this, Liz Rust from the RHSO created a presentation for the Zoning Board of Appeals, and we attended a meeting with them, including planning staff and 2 members of the ACHC, to talk about what do we do going forward. One of the options is to do nothing, have no 40Bs, whatever. But we still have plenty of housing need in the town. And there'll be projects that we will like. They'll have a special feature. They'll be in a special place. They'll have design, density, something about them that will allow us to embrace them, recommend them, and hopefully the selectmen do the same. But the developer will need an indication of support. The ZBA agreed that if something comes to them and it's a LIP, that LIP has been signed by the Board of Selectmen and ACHC. So unless there's some extraordinary reason otherwise, they would hear the application and follow through their normal procedure. So what Mark O'Hagan is proposing, he came to ACHC just for a conceptual plan, and we talked through 2 options that he had, but he's going to be showing you a proposal for an age-restricted development of 55 and older, an ownership development in a building that has elevators, because not only is it located adjacent to many multifamily houses on Great Road, but it also will provide a good downsizing option, of which many people my age and younger are looking for options now. And this would be first floor living, master bedroom, everything on the first floor with elevators. So because it addresses a need that we're hearing about all the time and helping people who want to leave their big houses but want to stay in town, we felt it would be worth putting this before you for a sense of the meeting to see if this is something that you think should proceed and the developer should do his due diligence. It's not a vote for the LIP application. It's just a sense of the meeting, so really not even a vote, I guess. Not sure. It's the first time we've done this, so we're not sure what, the feedback format should be. But if you are inclined to say go ahead, this will come back to you for a formal vote once all of the review is done. And so, as I said, we're using one of our important needs, housing for the elderly, and we're not yet in safe harbor, and we're not at 10%, but we expect both to happen in the next 12 months. So, Mark O'Hagan. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Mark O'Hagan from MCO and Associates out of Harvard, Mass. I've done some other work in town, most recently the 184 Main Street, a small 40B for sale development that we're working on. This is a project, and I had put together a collection of files on the zip drive, but it's not a PowerPoint, so I don't know if I'm going to be able to move through everything. The main rendering is here, so we can talk about it. I do believe the board had the package that shows some floor plans and shows the site plan, but I can run through the key aspects of the development and answer any questions that you may have.
I have one question. Your letter talks about 363 Main Street,
Yes.
and this
Oh, Great Road, I'm sorry.
one talks about Great Road.
It is 363 Great Road,
Okay.
so I apologize if I made a mistake. It's 361 and 363 Great Road, which is just west of the Main Street or Route 27 and 2A intersection. There's an existing house that's unoccupied on it that is on the west side of the property. The balance of the property, or the bulk of the property, is kind of a large triangular piece of about 4 acres that abuts the Meyer Hill Road condominium up in the back, as well as the Wampus Ave. I believe those are condominiums now, the kind of converted apartment style to the east. Generally across the street is the entrance to the golf course and Skyline Drive and properties up there. The site was, attractive to me for multifamily, largely on the basis that it is surrounded by multifamily. It seemed like a nice fit for that site. As Nancy said, we had looked at a couple of different options of a more traditional townhome design, as well as more of a single building garden style design. Given some of the grades that are there, if people have gone by, it gets relatively steep, particularly towards the back. There is some ledge out there. So really, after we kind of completed our review, we felt that having a single building with the way that we're locating it kind of on a little plateau of the property, as well as utilizing the grades to provide sufficient access for parking underneath, that it was a nice fit. It would limit the overall disturbance on the site, maintains better buffers for the neighbors up in the back in particular, as well as towards the Wampus Ave residential units. So we designed this building, which would have a total of 32 units. 8 of those would be affordable, be sold to people. One person would need to be 55 years or older. I think the town has other properties that are similar. So very specifically targeted towards your downsizing, age-restricted clientele. One of the aspects that we also thought was attractive is that by focusing on this type of a unit that's a little smaller than traditional townhomes that are being built, that we'd be able to hit a price point that really isn't overly being served now. So the homes that we designed are generally about 1,600 to 1,700 square feet. Modest by new construction and homes by today's standards, but we kind of purposely put them in a size that's larger than a lot of the apartment products that are coming online, where they might be 1,200 square feet or so, or 1,000 to 1,200 square feet, and new townhomes that are upwards in the, anywhere from 2,000 square feet to 3,000 square feet. So we thought this size is something that isn't being developed for sale, and at a price point in the mid-4s is also a price point that it really is being overlooked, or it's difficult to get any product at that price given today's economics. So between the combination of aspects from a marketing perspective, development perspective, design perspective, is really where we settled in on this type of a design. As we had said, the homes would be generally closer to 1,600 to 1,700 square feet, 2 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, nice living space. Everybody would have a deck. We've generally been able to separate the master bedroom from the secondary bedroom. All of the end units are a little bit larger and get a little more light, but the interior units are about 1,600 square feet as well. That would be, market and affordable units. They're all consistent, so no substantial changes from one to the other. Based on the current pricing under the LIP program, the affordable units would be roughly $200 a month. $200,000. What we did do, and I know it's something that ACHC has asked in the past and had asked on a previous project, is to keep the condo fees for the units consistent. So, if we graduated the condo fees, the pricing for the affordable units would be quite a bit higher. But we know that that's something that's been important to HCHC in the past. The aspect of the design that we also like is the way that you're seeing it kind of from the right side of the building here, coming up from Great Road. There would be entrance to the building on the lower level. So each unit would have at least one unit of secured parking inside the garage, outside the elements with direct elevator access up to their floor in the unit. So virtually all the units are handicap accessible or handicap adaptable. So we can really reach out to a broad range of people, particularly in the affordable perspective, with multi-level units aren't as overly attractive to them. It's just not suitable for them. So both on the affordable and on the market rate, we have the opportunity to meet that need that is tough to do in a more traditional townhome design. As we had said, 32 total units with 8 affordable homes. The building is the 4-story building that you see. It's just over 40 feet from a design perspective. As you can see on your site plan, which I'll put it all in one file next time. We've got a septic system to the west side of the property. The site has been tested. I'm working with Stamsky and McNary. They have done perk testing throughout the property and designed a system that does accommodate the building as we've proposed. There is town water on the street, so we would look to utilize town water and a private septic system to service the buildings. He's got a couple of areas for drainage, but he located one, sizable one, kind of towards the eastern side of the property, in front of the building, down behind. The building itself, and as part of the elevations that we included, was the backside. What you see on the site plan is you're coming up the property. Behind the building is the main entrance, and I say behind the building as if you're on Great Road. We've got the additional parking there where we can locate so they have direct access to the first level. But we're also able to do nice landscaping all the way around the building, with the exception of the drainage area. Hopefully we can maintain some of the existing vegetation to keep the viewscapes from Great Road as consistent as we can. There is a rise from Great Road up into the property. There's probably about 10 feet, 10, 12 feet in and of itself. So with this being tucked back with some vegetation, I think it would be even though it's a good sized building, would be relatively unobtrusive for people going back and forth. In terms of access, we would have just a singular access that would be on as far as we can on the western side. At that point, you've got good visibility looking west on Route 2A, and to the east, your visibility increases as you go. It's also close to the traffic light too, so there are some natural breaks in the traffic there because we know Great Road can be busy. But given the location and the site distance, we've done a preliminary evaluation, and that all looks positive as well. So we certainly understand the town's I'll say newfound position as it relates to the potential safe harbor. We have done work with the town. Really, the bulk of my work, I've tried to do LIPs in conjunction with communities for most of the projects that I deal with. Certainly open to working with the town if there's any particular concerns on it. But we would appreciate the board's support, or at least giving us a nod to continue as compared to stop. My commitment or my obligation with the property seller is knowing what the town status was, that if there wasn't going to be local support, it wasn't going to happen. So that's why we've started reaching out to the local committees, and obviously wanted to meet with the board to get a feeling of the nature of the project and its acceptance.
Thank you. Dean?
Yes, looking at the proximity of this to the end of Wampus Avenue, is there any possibility of connecting the parking lot from this to Wampus Ave? It strikes me that it might be a good access point, especially for people leaving your site that want to turn left on Route 2A. Instead, they could do Wampus. There is a right-of-way of Wampus Ave that continues, that does abut with the property. It's a little tricky. I wouldn't say it's impossible. When we looked at it, it felt keeping it kind of, set aside as its own would be probably the best option. But I do believe that we have access to Wampus Ave from the front eastern side of the property. If it's something that was of particular interest, we could certainly take a look at it. I think, if nothing else, if you could open it up enough just for emergency access. That's how we had looked at it at one point as well. We are looking at a new fire station north of the site, so it would be a great access point for it.
Sure. It's certainly something we can take a look at.
Thank you.
This is a good 40B project, and, you know, I would give you the green light to go forward. It meets a particular housing need in the community for, you know, downsizing couples or individuals 55 and over at price points that are reasonable, you know, in the $400,000 range, and for the 8 affordable units, they'd be, what, I think in the low 200s?
About right around 200. The number, I think it came out at 197 based on current underwriting standards, interest rates and such, so that can modify a little bit, but in that range.
Hi. I just wanted to understand, the upslope here is to the left off the picture and back?
The upslope is to the left of the picture going up, yeah. Yeah, so essentially we have the structure with the parking behind it as you look at it from Great Road, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And when you said the front entrance was on the far side of this building?
This is by the parking here. This would be, so from the surface parking, people would have the direct access into the building. The lower level would have the garage access and elevator from there up to all the individual units.
I appreciate this project for retired people. I've certainly run into a tremendous number of people who would like to stay in town and feel that they, you know, either don't want to stay in their big house or can't afford to stay in their big house. So I appreciate that, you know, this kind of development.
Oh, yeah, because we see in other projects, we have a lot of people, you know, it seems that the age-restricted sale, it's as much of it's a lifestyle decision as much as anything else. And so many people, they're traveling a lot, they've got other residences, being able to stay in the community where it is their home, their church, their family, their friends has been what we hear from everybody else. We'd like to stay in this town, not have to travel and go to other places. So that's the group that we're trying to meet. So
great, thank you.
Thank you.
I also generally support the project. Lately, we've had developers come before us who are really excited about those $3 per square foot rents they're getting in these 40B developments, Powder Mill Road, Avalon. Have you looked at rentals, which obviously would be a big benefit to the town?
Well, quite frankly, I looked at rentals and saw that you've got about 300 new ones that are coming, so plus some other projects that are there. So that's why we looked at it more from the sense of a for sale. We really economically couldn't do the size units that we've proposed and do it as a rental. You kind of, you know, max out at a point. But for people that are paying that, you know, $3 a foot rent, you know, they could acquire this, and even with a mortgage, and probably be in the same range of what they're paying for rent. So I think that we'll find more than enough people that would still like to own it, have their, you know, their own place, be able to make it their own, customize it. And apartments are terrific for a lot of people, but I think for most people it doesn't always feel like it's home, and so we're trying to tap into that group.
Okay, and it looks like from these plans are fairly well developed. I don't know whether you know how far you went into this process, but we do like people to go to the design review board and run this design by them. They're advisory only, but they certainly have input to us, and we like to listen to them.
Yeah, we had worked with them on 184 Main Street and got some terrific ideas from them, so it's certainly willing to do it. These are we're several iterations through. They're always, you know, changing and being tweaked up a little bit. But as Nancy said, this has really been the second stop after a very really conceptual plans that we had showed ACHC. So we'll go through that full process if, you know, getting the level of support from this board, and meet with whoever would like to meet with us. We try to meet with everybody up front. It kind of streamlines things as if things proceed along. So we certainly would meet with the design review board.
Okay, and you mentioned water. I don't know if you've been following the water wars between the town of Acton and the town of Concord. I believe the water main on this stretch of Great Road belongs to Concord. They have allowed businesses and new development to hook up, as far as I'm aware. So, but you have to deal with the town of Concord, I think, about water, don't you?
I'll check with the engineer. I thought George told me that this was Acton, but I could be wrong. So I'll
Acton
check
does
it
go
too.
some way down Great Road.
That's, I think it's on the other side. I think what he
Okay.
explained to me is it's
Right.
on the other side of,
Okay.
of Main Street or 2A, I mean, of
Okay.
27.
That
But
may
I could be wrong. I'll certainly confer
Okay.
with him
Yeah.
and start, focusing in on some of those, some of those details if
Okay.
we're proceeding along.
Engineering gave us some comments today. I don't know if you had a chance to see them yet.
I haven't seen him yet, no.
Okay. They have it's a state road, so you need a permit to
Correct.
do a curb cut. They have a sidewalk design. We usually require sidewalks or a contribution to sidewalk fund on these projects.
Okay.
Apparently, it's been already approved by the state, so we'd probably be asking you to build the sidewalk in front of the development.
Okay.
Going forward. So,
Okay.
thank you.
Thank you.
My question was about the sidewalk, and my second was put my name on the list.
I think I took it off the website. I saw the picture, and then I saw it on the website with the list of names. I think they were done. So when I came in and I saw you sitting here, I said, I'm in trouble. So it won't happen again.
I'm sorry, I just had one other quick question. I don't know how this works. You mentioned in your memo here that at least one member of the household has to be over 55. I just always conceived of age restriction as everybody has to be over 55. You could have a couple with a couple of teenagers, and where one of them is over 55, so would they be eligible to live in this?
Based on
state statute? Yeah.
Based on state statute, the
Okay.
statute is one person 55 years or older. So
Okay.
it doesn't preclude the fact that there could be children, but in my
Yeah.
experience, it doesn't say it doesn't happen, but
Right.
it's the exception. I've had it with people with a grandchild that, took in their grandchild, but I haven't seen it from people with, children that are school aged. They might be in college or older, but generally by 55, we're winding down, so I'm optimistic.
Not sure exactly what's required. I propose a motion just to deliver the sense of the board that we're favorably disposed towards this development.
Do we want to take public comment first?
Oh, I'll get out of the way. Thank you.
Thanks. Jim Snyder Grant, West Acton. A couple quick questions. One of the big issues in modern society, but to focus on elders in Acton, is isolation and loneliness. So I'm wondering if there's if some of this has some common space, some place for people to gather in the plan. I think that would be a great feature to address a important issue in Acton.
I didn't design any as it right now where it's for sale, but it's something on the first level we could look to expand a foyer and get some common space. It's certainly something we can look at, yeah.
And the other request was that since you're looking at the site now, with Stamsky and McNary, be a great time to be thinking about whether it's possible to put in, if there's room in the site for a ground source heat pump. That gives a chance for people to have much lower heating and cooling bills in the decades ahead, and allows you to, for some households, to consider not to use natural gas, which we're trying to move away from in Acton. So that was just a comment. Thank you.
Yes, Franny Osmond, West Acton. I have a question before I ask my questions, which is, what happens to these concerns? Does the Board of Selectmen or any committee have any authority to affect change in the development, or do we just make suggestions to the developers and they can take them or leave them?
I can answer
Yeah.
From a development perspective, this is the beginning of a pretty long process where we interact with all different boards and get feedback from all of them and incorporate as many things as we can. From a development perspective, the easiest way to get through an approval process is to respond to the issues that you can, that are reasonable and that are appropriate. So we certainly do our best to do it. And there are various levels of approvals, particularly with the ZBA, that they force us to incorporate things we may not otherwise. So I certainly do think that changes occur, but it doesn't necessarily mean we can do everything, but we certainly try to respond.
Fran, can I just add to that? Yeah. The most obvious thing is they need the signature of ACHC, and they need the signature of the Board of Selectmen on the application. So we negotiate changes, but that gives us tremendous leverage.
Okay. Yeah. So the things that I care about on the Commission on Disability and on the Transportation Advisory Committee, I wrote traffic light brake. Oh yes, you said the traffic light will give brakes in the traffic, and I sort of think that's only going in one direction, and it might prove a little bit difficult still with the traffic coming from the other direction to turn left out of there. So it might require people to turn right and go Harris Street or some other solution. I would second what Dean said about connectivity to other streets, even for pedestrian space, and that ties to a request that I would have. If I were moving into this place, first of all, I would want common space. It would be very important to me to not just have an isolated apartment and not be able to have a way to get to know the large number of people. And in that same way, I would want there to be a way that pedestrians can walk all around the building, not just have cars be the main access, including pedestrian access to the back, to other streets, and to Great Road, so that there's a lot of choices. So you go out and you can take a walk, and you're not just required. In that way, when you said setting aside, you said set aside would be best. You mentioned that, to sort of be on its own. And I actually don't think it's the best. I think it's better if it is connected to other neighborhoods around. I would hope that there would be parking with this many seniors, parking space for the van or bus to be able to park. Easy access to get in and out. And finally, I have a question about adaptable houses. If somebody buys a house, an apartment for $200,000, and they do need accessibility, how much would it cost to make it actually accessible? And would that be on top of their house, the cost of their apartment? I guess I should be looking at you.
I can respond. Generally, for the affordable units, what we do is, we're holding the lottery before we're doing all the finish on the homes. So if we had somebody, what's nice about this design is that you don't really have to reconfigure anything. We generally have the space, we have the door openings, it comes down to dealing with different cabinets, some handholds and things that could be easily accommodated and really, inexpensive. I don't think there would be any charge for the people as long as we knew about it up front. It's when you're taking things out and putting them back in that it can be expensive in any situation, and particularly if you're dealing with townhomes and overall access issues here. I think for me, from a handicap issue, that having the elevator access is the most significant thing that will open it up to everybody. On the parking aspect, we're estimating 36 spaces within the building, within the lower level, and we've got, I think, 40 or 42 outside. So we would have more than, 2 per unit. And we would have space and immediate access for if it was a council on aging or some type of a bus that was providing services to older residents. And also, when I had made reference to it being kind of standalone from the access perspective, that wasn't intended in terms of, not connecting with the other ones. I think the location of the property, if we did have a connection through with Wampus, I think I pictured it more pedestrian-based, or even people with bikes. The new bike ramp is just down the street, and access to the shops and other things as well. So from a pedestrian access, we certainly have looked at how we could take advantage of what's in the area and get them there as efficiently and as safely as we could. And as I said, we will take a look at the vehicular for, potentially for emergency access off of Wampus as well. I think that
So that's all. Mostly it's the connectivity and the sociability that I would really like to see emphasized.
Barry Rosen again. Can I address the developer? One of the questions I was wondering, I know it's very early in everything, and perhaps the select people have the answer up there, but can you run through what appliances are going to be in there, specifically appliances that use water? Kind of a little selfish reason for that. I'm looking to see that we're using water-saving appliances as much as possible. I just finished a while ago, as one of my last acts, reviewing with the attorneys represented Powder Mill Place, looking to have them reduce the water usage, the overall water usage by putting in water-sense appliances, and Attorney Levine agreed to even change the dishwashers to make them water-sense dishwashers. It also lowers mitigation fees that ultimately developers pay. Have you thought that far ahead yet? I know it's early.
I use WaterSense.
Okay. Oh, I'm sorry.
So I use WaterSense fixtures everywhere now as a matter of course. All your toilets are low-flow toilets. I'd have to take a look at the dishwashers to see. I hadn't seen WaterSense ones, but if it's good enough for Mr. Levine, it's good enough for me. So I'll certainly take a look at it, but we understand we understand it based on everything that we've been seeing and really everything, all the projects that we deal with. That's of issue. Obviously, overall energy savings and impact will be taken into consideration. I'm sure the town's familiar with all of the new, standards that we need to comply with for insulation and heat and everything. So that will all be taken into effect. So.
Chair Fredericks, West Acton. If it's good enough for Mr. Lee, it's probably not good enough for me. But that said, do we know how many units would be allowed without a 40B? Do you know that number? You probably know. Number of units that would be allowed without 40B.
It's based on the zoning. I think it's R2, so 20,000 square feet. I think they had septics for it was 3 or 4 units. I forget.
Thank you.
Single-family homes.
Yes. And the drawing that was shown, how close is the steep hill to 2A? Because I fear it's going to look like it's towering, like it's, I don't know, you guys have been down the East Highway in Manhattan, and there's these towering, buildings. And so I'm wondering how close to the 2A, it looks like the parking is in the back. So this would be, yes, so the corner of the building would be towering over 2A in my opinion. And so I want to know what percentage of the site would be clear cut. That's a very important thing to me because green space for gathering, for walking around the building, and so I want to know how much of the space, the land, is planned for clear cutting.
I'd say probably about 2 acres is my guess when we incorporate the septic system, the building, and the parking, roughly.
Out of how many? So
out of about 4.
Great. Yeah. So this leads to my overall comment. The Board of Selectmen basically can demand anything they want in reason, like they don't have to approve until they're happy with it. And I believe that rentals are way more important as they actually count. Like, for example, if this project goes through and only 25%, that basically doesn't even cover anything except for the project itself. But if it was 100%, then it would cover us for a 3-year safe harbor. And so that's just a point. Because for me, just because there's a market demand doesn't mean that it translates to a public necessity. Because the units, the new tax revenues don't pay for themselves, as we know, because if they did, the fire station would be free, you know? And so I hope that we push for, again, the green space, pushing the building back into the woods, or limiting the number of mature trees. There's a lot of trees this big on that site. And encouraging community so that the place in Wampus and people can come, because we have a big environmental justice issue here in Acton, I believe, where we try and cram everything in and don't allow the green space that I think is necessary for mental health in the suicide capital of the United States. You know, I think that it's important to consider these things. And yes, so I hope that somebody starts writing these things down, because it was concerning to me that while the Board of Selectmen have all the power to say yes or no, that nobody seems to be writing down the things that we're saying. Thank you.
I think there's a motion on the floor. Maybe, Dean, you want to restate it?
Yes, I would move that the Board of Selectmen express their the consensus that we are favorably disposed to this project, and expect it'll come back to us with more details.
Terrific. Second.
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much. And I did write them down.
Yes.
All right.
In conjunction with the cable license renewal of Verizon New England, Inc., the Cable Advisory Committee, our Cable Advisory Committee, is required to hold a public hearing to review the performance of Verizon and to hear from the community on future cable needs and related interest. The public hearing needs to be authorized by the Board of Selectmen. So I have here Oleg Volinsky, who is chairman of our Cable Advisory Committee.
So, hello, my name is Oleg Volinsky. I'm a chairperson of the Cable Advisory Committee. And John here pretty much summarized what we're here to asking about. So we are going through the process of license renewal with Verizon and Comcast. This hearing is specifically related to Verizon. Verizon license is expiring in October 2nd, 2021. It sounds like it's quite a bit away, but it's actually, as part of the process, it's actually coming in quite quickly. So as part of this license renewal process, there is ascertainment that expected to be done that reviews performance of cable provider, as well as wants to generate the information from community about the experience and what they would like to see going forward from a cable provider. Cable Advisory Committee would like to ask Board of Selectmen to authorize us to hold this hearing, ascertainment hearing. We'd like to do it, we're going to try to do it as soon as possible, given timeline. It takes we're required to have about 2 weeks notice, public notice about this, so we're thinking about, it's going to be maybe during the summer, most likely. Open to any questions you have.
Any questions?
So I have a motion. I would like to move that the Board of Selectmen, as the cable television licensing issuing authority, authorize the Cable Advisory Committee to hold an ascertainment hearing regarding the cable license renewal of Verizon New England, Inc. Cable license, October 3, 2006 to October 2, 2021. The purpose of the hearing will be to review the performance of the cable television operator Verizon New England, Inc., and to hear testimony on future cable-related needs in the interest of the community.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, town meeting. Improvements to town meeting.
Yeah. You know, my first experience at this was in town meeting 2018 when I was an associate member of the Finance Committee and a selectman-elect, and looking out at the audience that first night, and there were like 300 people there, and realizing all of the work that had gone into the run-up to that town meeting. Why aren't more people here? And then again, in connection with Article 38, that was the non-binding citizens petition at town meeting to purchase the Kmart parcel. It came up well after 11 o'clock. 150 people were in attendance, and I could understand from one side, the stalwarts were there and they wanted to finish up the meeting that night, but there were a group of people advocating for the article. People who were their supporters were told that there wouldn't be anything, no new articles would be taken up after 10:30. So people were pretty stymied. The select board got a host of emails. I responded to a number of them, and there were two individuals, Jody Bromberg, who's here tonight, and Amy Ryman, and I said, well, to all of them, we'll come to our meeting on April the 8th and speak up about this. And Jody and Amy and I did get together for coffee one night, I think it was the beginning of May, after that, you know, to talk about improvements to town meeting. After that, I attended a meeting of the League of Women Voters Planning Group where plans for a further town meeting study were discussed, and over Memorial Day weekend, I met with our new town moderator, Joanne Berry, who said she was all in on it. And I would, you know, like for the board to consider establishing a subcommittee. The first part of the work would be to study, a short-term, one of a short-term nature, to study proposals for adjustment which can be incorporated and implemented into the format for town meeting 2020. And from our preliminary discussions, again, this is all to increase attendance. And items to think about would be what articles draw people to town meeting, and make sure those are strategically placed on the warrant, or they are moved up that particular night, which the moderator does have the discussion to do. Have the first night of town meeting start earlier, say at 6:30, so preliminary matters can be gotten out of the way by 7 o'clock. And think about ending each evening at 10 p.m. Again, the primary goal is to increase attendance. The second task and the more long-term goal of the subcommittee would be to identify issues for possible long-term study, such as how do we get better information to voters. Another idea that's come up was remote voting, and I would just like to point out at this point there's a state hurdle. There's a state statute, MGL, Chapter 39, Section 10, which requires that anyone who votes must be present and able to participate in the proceedings. So if you're talking about remote electronic voting, besides a host of issues you got to deal with there, the first hurdle is getting the state legislature to adopt enabling legislation for the governor to sign it. So, I really kind of, thought about, this a lot as to what, citizen groups, could participate on it. Any committee would have to include Mark Hald. There are several, league members. There was an extensive league study done in 2008, which was excellent. Quite a few of their recommendations were implemented and have made town meeting go much better, over the last decade. So I would look to individuals like Nancy Tavernier, Ann Chang, Pat Clifford, Sahana Proheet, some group of them. Newer members of our community, Elizabeth Ashi, Jody Bromberg, and Amy Ryman. Also representatives of the Council of Aging Board, a representative of the Commission on Disabilities, and Cadillac also comes to mind as a very active town meeting member from the teller side. And some person who first raised this with me when I was on the Finance Committee as an associate member, he said, let's do a better job with our warrant, which I should point out is one of the better warrants in the state. And I asked why that, and he said, well, if we put more information out there, maybe more people would come. So, I'd like to draw from, a number of these people if they're interested in serving and, put a study group together, dealing with short-term fixes and adjustments which might make the meeting go better, again, increasing attendance, and none of this is a put down in any way of the great efforts that were made in 2008 by the League of Women Voters.
So I think this is a good idea, although it would be an advisory committee, not a subcommittee, just a technicality. It also probably, I didn't hear in your list of people that it would include the moderator. You mentioned the moderator.
Yeah,
you mentioned the moderator earlier, but I think not as a member.
She would be she said she didn't want to be a member of the committee, but wanted to participate.
I see. She's obviously key, I think.
Oh, yeah. Difference between an advisory body and a subcommittee?
A subcommittee would be composed of us, like if three of us wanted to go off and do something. It's a partial committee.
Okay.
So the advisory committee is a committee to make recommendations to the Board of Selectmen.
Thank you.
Right. So I think that this is a good idea. You did want to say that there are other impediments besides the Massachusetts general law against electronic voting, right? That's an important step, but there are many. I think there would be many hurdles for that. Anyway, but I agree with just about all the other points, and we should do anything to make it easier. I would, however, note that the town meeting itself has power to change anything that we would recommend. So,
Peter?
No, I think it's a great idea. Again, the town meeting originally came out of the Mayflower Compact concept. We don't need all these lords and ladies and kings and rulers to tell us how to govern ourselves. We're just going to govern ourselves. But it does require people to step up to the plate and get involved, and anything we can do to increase involvement I'm in favor of. The way we usually do these things is we need a charge, I think, for an advisory committee. The charge can have certain boards that would have representatives on the committee, but for citizens at large, they have to go through the VCC and get screened and sent back to the board. So, for citizens at large, you can encourage people to send in applications to the VCC, but I don't think we generally don't appoint specific individuals to these boards. They go through the process. So.
Well, when we did the town manager search committee, a number of us said we're interested in serving, and the board chair sent out an email, thank you for stepping up. Could we do that here?
Okay, I mean, yeah, I don't remember how that was put together, but yeah, I suppose anything the selectmen decide. I don't want, what's the VCC's role here, or this would be my question, I don't know.
I just would like to, get going on this. People have indicated, an interest, and I've tried to come up with a broad group of either, people who represent certain constituencies.
John, do you have any concern?
Well, I think that it sounds like you've identified a few people that have shown an interest in the matter, but there may be other people in the community that are just as interested but weren't aware of an opportunity to serve. I would suggest that if you have a certain group that you think should be on it, then maybe just add 1 or 2 other spots and put it out there.
I think we might just want to take one more meeting and write a charge. Okay. I don't see that it's a huge amount of overhead to be staffed through the VCC. I don't know whether you specifically, John, checked with all the people who you mentioned. I think it's a good cross-section of people, but we don't know, unless you know, whether they're all willing to serve in this capacity. So I think we should have a charge with a certain size in mind, and maybe some descriptions of 2 people from this area, 2 people from that area, whatever we want to put on it. 7 people total, or 5 people plus 2 associates, whatever you think is appropriate. And we put together a charge.
Sure. Well, let me think further and bring a charge to our meeting on July 1. How's that?
Makes sense to me.
Yeah, I just second what David said. I think having a written charge we can react to is good. I don't think it should take a huge amount of time to do it. I think it's good this is broadcast so that if there's anybody out there that's not been specifically named that might be interested in it, they can certainly contact the town manager's office to express their interest. I think the other issue, and I'm going to be dealing with it later on, talking about some of these boards and committees, I hope that when you come back with your charge, you will include a projected sunset date.
Oh, yeah.
So that we know it's a set task that gets performed, and then that's it. And if that doesn't work, we form another committee at subsequent time. Thank you.
The League is interested in doing, for our local study, working on town meeting once again. I'm not really sure what the extent of the study the League wants to do will encompass. We would definitely like to join with your town selectmen's committee. I'd like to mention several caveats that you have to consider. It's the job of the Board of Selectmen to do the warrant. I mean, that's your purview, not anybody else. However, it is the purview of the town meeting members themselves to say, let's get out of here, so we're going to stay till 1 o'clock. Even after the League study wanted us to not take up anything after 10:30, and that was sort of written into the rules and the agreements that we were able to have Don McKenzie take over, which Peter Ashton also took over, and which I think, since Joanne was on the League committee, she will definitely take over. But there is a problem when you're trying to close out a meeting and you've done Monday and Tuesday and nobody wants to come back on Wednesday, and they'll just sit there forever. So you're either going to have to do something perhaps about the charter, or which would make the thing more difficult to, just not a front-of-the-mill sort of committee.
Get a charge to John ahead of July 1.
Okay, change the name of Board of Selectmen to Select Board. David?
So this is something that I brought up at the first meeting we had after town meeting, when we were organizing committee assignments and the like. I feel that the term Board of Selectmen is an anachronistic term. We were just, John and I were just recently at the Mass Municipal Association meeting, and quite a few towns are changing the names of their boards to Select Board. There were, I would say at that meeting where maybe 30 towns were present, maybe a few more, I'm not sure. There probably were half of them that had already changed or were considering changing. I don't know if that 50% is representative of the Commonwealth or not, but it's obviously trending that way. We're coming, off of a board that was majority women. I think the last board, which was majority women, it might have seemed self-serving for them to make this change, but I think it's not self-serving for us to make this change, and I think it's time we made this change.
Dean first.
Yeah, I guess I'm anachronistic, but I'm not going to drive the stake into the ground for that one. I'd defer to the chairwoman.
I've been a member of the Board of Selectmen for 11 years now, and I've had no problem with being a member of the Board of Selectmen.
Yeah, I would, join, David. I just think it's an outdated term. In my, writing notes and talking, I refer to us as the Select Board. Now, in doing that, to former selectmen, I got a note from Paulina Kanibi who said, leave it alone. I am, very proud to be linked to the Selectmen's past and the like, and Janet Adachi didn't think much of the idea. We would be the Select Board, but I guess still refer to us as either Selectmen or Select Women, or in some instances,
or just
or Select Board members,
yeah,
which I think is an awkward term. But
members of the board, I think, is the most common common term. I don't know what the legalities of this are. For example, can we just refer to ourselves, as the Select Board informally, like change the email address and the link on the website, or does it require that we do the formal change of changing the charter?
Nina, can you help us on the legality?
you happen to.
Nina Pickering Cook, Town Council's office. It would require a legal change. Under the charter, you are the Board of Selectmen, and that is referred to throughout the charter as well as throughout the bylaws, and where that is tied to the scope of your authority, that really is something that would need to be formally changed. I know that the boards in Concord and Lexington have gone through this formal process. They are now both the select boards. Lexington's had to be a special legislation because they're created by this state legislation as opposed to a charter, but this would be a charter change, as you know from prior experience with the planning board change. It is a multi-step process. Whether the bylaws can be changed before you change that charter, or whether you want to informally recognize yourself in that way, I wouldn't make any formal changes, but if folks are more comfortable referring to themselves as a select board informally, I think that's fine. I would agree that this is a change that we're seeing more and more often, and more often when people send things to me, they refer to you all as the select board, and I always change it back to the Board of Selectmen to make sure the legal entity is correct, but that is a trend I certainly am seeing.
So, Nina, So it would require a charter change, which is a town meeting vote, and then a ballot vote.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, it's my understanding we're going to have a charter change on the ballot next spring anyway because of the planning board issue, so.
That's next spring, yeah.
Franny?
It's funny, I didn't mind calling myself a member of the Board of Selectmen. I guess it was sort of like rebellious compared to my usual, more feminist self. I just sort of had fun being old-fashioned. But I think out of respect for people who are learning from us, the children growing up in Acton, it really draws attention to the fact that it is a co-ed board and it has nothing to do with gender, and it would be nice to do that. And nowadays, changing things, changing the charters, find, replace, it's not going to be that hard. I do think it's a good idea. And it doesn't really matter what gender people are, so I would suggest having something like either the member of the select board or just a select person, because that would open up the space for some people who are not binary, if that's the right term.
Tara Fredericks, West Acton, ex-select person, ex-select slave, ex-select board of member of anything. So I have a question for Nina, and the question is, can we pass something that has both terms be legitimate or have authority? And the reason I ask is that while I'm totally sympathetic to the idea of the change, and I would prefer the change for the reasons that Franny states, I wonder how much staff time that will take, how much legal time, and whether that's better spent saving trees or saving water. So I'd like to know whether we could put both in effect so that we could start using it informally and then have the existing documentation remain the same. Thank you.
No, I don't think having both in effect would be any more efficient or a better use of resources. My concern on that front would be the legal confusion as opposed to just moving from one to the other and being very clear where there's only one entity here as opposed to two. One's the Board of Selectmen and one's the Select Board, and people think they're two separate boards.
Good evening. I'll make this brief. Jody Bromberg, Pats Hill. I'm philosophically in favor of this change, but I do have a follow-up question for Nina. What would the cost be of making the change to the charter, and is there a way to lessen that cost or to combine efficiencies with whatever other changes to the charter that need to be made?
It's slightly more complicated than Franny made it out to be, but not much. There's essentially zero extra legal costs. This is not something we need to research and look into. It is drafting a town meeting motion, making sure the ballot language is correct. Those are all things that would be done in the ordinary course preparing for a town meeting anyways. So as far as additional legal costs or legal work, it would be very minimal. I can't speak to staff time, but I think that would be fairly minimal as well.
I think that it would be something that we could do without much cost. We don't print letterhead anymore. It's all digital, so it's just changing a few letters in the computer and updating the website. It could take an afternoon, but I think it'd be, if it's something the board wants to do, we could do it.
I don't know if I just want to express I'm generally in favor of it. I don't feel really strongly about it, but I think it's a good thing to do.
I'll make a motion that we change the name of the Board of Selectmen to Select Board, and that we make this change concurrent with other charter changes.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Nay. Motion carries.
So that was what, 3 to 1 or? And an abstention.
getting late. Review of town board and committees.
If it's okay, I'd like to kick this off.
Sure.
Kind of put this on the goals. My main concern is the sidewalk committee, which I've been the liaison to for several years now. I just sent everybody an email. I probably should have sent it out sooner. Cameron Cousins is a member of the sidewalk committee. They're now down to 2 members, so they don't have a quorum, so they can't meet. She sent an email to Corey about what might happen, what his suggestions were going forward. And Corey wrote back and suggested that it ought to be expanded, the concept of the sidewalk committee, to a complete streets issues, to include complete streets issues besides just the sidewalks, so all the things that are contemplated in our complete streets policy. He says it would be beneficial if the public process and prioritization was handled by the committee similar to the existing sidewalk committee approach. He's got a proposed traffic calming policy that was drafted by staff. We're attempting to formalize a standardized approach for evaluating complete street requests as they come in and prioritizing them. So I also, my thought was that since the sidewalk committee doesn't really exist anymore, we want to move all those functions to the Transportation Advisory Committee. I talked to Franny, she's the chair. She's here tonight to provide us input into that. Basically, the sidewalk committee was created about 10 years ago. Paulina Nibby, mover to get it going. In those days, sidewalks were the squeaky wheel gets a sidewalk built. They evaluated every single street in town with criteria that they developed and graded them all, and now have priorities for the most important places to build sidewalks. It doesn't always work out because DPW can't build the top priority sidewalks immediately on schedule. They need easements. There's other issues that come up. So, but the sidewalk committee does get complaints from people that they haven't moved quick enough on sidewalks, even though they don't have control over construction. So it's a difficult position for them to be in. But there are all those materials for grading all the sidewalks in town and the work they've done on it. And I don't know what people think about whether the Transportation Advisory Committee might be a good place to move all that work to, or how we're going to handle those issues going forward.
I just want to mention that the email you referenced was in the packet the copies of the current charge for the Sidewalk Committee and for the Transportation Advisory Committee were also included in the packet.
I think it's an excellent idea to combine these, because I don't know what we would want to call it, whether we would want to call it the Complete Streets Committee or something like that, as Peter suggests. But I think many of the things overlap these days as far as various transportation issues. So I think that would be a good idea. I don't know, again, though, if we would want to take some time, maybe till next meeting, and have one of us or someone put together another charge for a combined committee and maybe review it with Franny and see what we want to do. There's also one other issue for the committee too. We can let this one play out, but there's also I'd like to disband the Morrison Farm Committee.
Yeah. Wait on it. Okay, anything on transportation? Sidewalk? Sorry. Transportation or sidewalk?
Yeah, I'd agree with David to prepare a charge. I think it does make good sense to try to put all the transportation issues together involving sidewalks, complete streets, maybe even the van system, look at it holistically. So hopefully somebody can come together with a proposed charge.
John, do you have anything?
On Morrison Farm.
Yeah, all right. So we'll put this on hold till the next meeting, and we'll come up with a charge for the committee?
Sure. Are you the liaison to the
Transportation.
Transportation Advisory Committee? You want to work with Franny to come up with a new charge? Okay.
I sort of missed, and I didn't read the background information. Did you not want to include this train station advisory committee in there? Is that,
Not yet.
okay. I know I talked to somebody about it a few months ago. That was just my question. Thanks.
Okay.
Sad sack stays.
Yes.
No.
Yeah. Okay, Morrison Farm. Who's
I
got
think,
that?
well, I'm actually a member of that committee. It hasn't met since January 2016. I got a call from Mary Ann Ashton today, who was the chair.
Very convenient.
Pardon?
The day of our meeting, you get a call. I'm just kidding.
Yeah. Well, she knew it was, she saw the agenda and it was on tonight. The last action the committee took was a unanimous vote to take the farmhouse down. We passed it on to the selectmen, and there was never any action taken on the motion. Mary Ann said, and I would concur, just dissolve the committee because there's nothing left for us to do, and it would be hard to, whether the people who are on it would even be, some aren't even in town anymore, would they be willing to continue to serve?
Ann?
I'm on it, and what is happening now are staff functions. I'm working with Tom to make sure that we get the cellar hole finally done. We now, from what I understand, he's finally got 3 stonemasons to get the Robbins cellar hole fixed. The thing that concerns me is I don't know how the staff is going to do all the historical kiosks that we said were going to be done for the CPC money. You know, there's still CPC money that's outstanding. They're working, some of it's going to be for the cellar hole, some of it's going to be for the paths that are still going on. I don't know whether you just want, it's true, we haven't really met, but we have set out a path for other people to do the work that we haven't been able to do because we don't have the power to do it. You understand what I'm saying?
Yes, I'm just now, wondering in my own mind what to do, and I don't know if somebody has any suggestions. I mean, the committee hasn't met in 3.5 years.
Well, I think that at a minimum, if the work of the committee is to continue, the charge would have to be updated because it references town meetings from 1997. And although goals may not have changed, I think it's worth incorporating what has happened since then and what the board's goals are for this group going forward if it is going to remain an entity. It hasn't met in 3 years, as you mentioned, or more than 3 years. And so I think it's another thing that we could come back with some revisions to, or sort of a closure plan.
Take out the soccer fields. The soccer fields were taken out long ago.
Okay, well, that's sort of a specific.
No, I meant, you had, when I read the thing, you had the soccer fields in the charge, and that wasn't part of it. No, we have CPC funds that are outstanding that haven't been spent. The committee itself is not capable of getting the contracts and all that sort of stuff to get these particular projects done. I don't know, I can do what I always do, which is bug the staff, which is something that I do to get things done. And I will continue to do that. But you're right, the committee hasn't met.
Is there another committee, I don't know, I'm just, Recreation, Open Space, Historical Commission, that would be appropriate for this work?
The Historical Commission, who saves things that from the Depression era? No.
I'm not trying to open up a discussion. I just,
Forget that.
I was just kind of brainstorming as to, is there another committee?
Well,
without making any suggestions.
I will work with Bill Clower to write the kiosk things that we have decided long ago in the plan to put up. If we get the text done, somebody else has got to build the things because I'm not about ready to build them. And it's going to have to come out of CPC funds, and somebody at the end is going to have to write a CPC report saying we have fulfilled our obligations under the monies that we got. So I don't know how that gets done without some sort of, does the staff do that kind of stuff too? Or do you have to have volunteers do it? I don't know.
And I think we'll take this under advisement the way we've taken the other and come back to the next meeting.
Oh, you can call me.
I know where to find you.
Okay.
I'd like to, it sounds like a lot of the work that needs to be done really is, I think you've got the ideas, you just need the implementation, and certainly with the changeover in town staff, I'm sure the town manager can take this well in hand to see some things get accomplished over there, and certainly as the board's representative of CPC, I would like to see any of those outstanding funds either be expended or returned.
Hi, I'm Charlie Aronson.
Charlie?
I think it's interesting that I'm also on the Morrison Farm Committee. And my perception was that we were waiting for some of the things that we had decided needed to be done to get done, and they just haven't. But as far as I know, we're ready to carry on with all the rest of the things that were on the list. It's just we need to catch up and spend some of the CPC money that's sitting there in a bucket, not being able to be used for something else, and get this done, because it was voted at town meeting to do these things.
Thank you. Tara?
Tara Fredericks, West Acton. I seem to remember voting that the town meeting voted down this plan for the, theme park, soccer fields, whatever it was. And there was a great movement to protect those meadows where the hens are roosting. And so I am glad to hear the idea of taking out the soccer fields from the mission. That might help open up more ideas for what to do with the parcel, as opposed to, I felt like there was a lot of, it was heavy on sports on the committee. And it's just my opinion.
Thank you.
And thank you. And I believe that before anybody has any ideas about tearing down the building, that they should check with the Historical Commission. I know that you've got to go through an demo approval process, but there's also a 104 review. And I would hope that we would do what we were talking about years ago, which is to fix the building and use it for housing or another municipal building. Thank you.
Okay. Green Advisory Board?
The reason we got, for John, the reason we were able to buy the land is because we were going to use it for soccer fields. And so Mr. Mullen was able to get a whole bunch of people who like soccer to vote in favor of spending the money to get it. When the committee reformed after about 3 different iterations, the soccer fields were taken out, and we have the historic bits and pieces of the property done. The things that are left are the Robins, Cellar Hall, the parking lot, which is done, which is really great, looks fantastic, absolutely wonderful. It needs kiosks to talk about Ice House Pond, which haven't been done, and the trail work is being done. And Tom has been working on the trail work when he has a chance. This last Board of Selectmen voted not to subdivide the lot to take out the house for use. So the house just sits there, and it wasn't used. It's not going to be, in its present form, it can't be used. The lot is non-conforming, and the Selectmen voted not to subdivide the Morrison property. It should be torn down.
Okay, so we're taking this under advisement. Green Advisory Board.
You know, I'm not sure, I'm the liaison to the Green Advisory Board. I'm not sure why that wound up on this list. I don't think anything needs to be done with the Green Advisory Board. They got great members. They're doing the carbon, emission study, and they're moving forward. So I'm not sure why that wound up on there.
Okay.
And I'm also either a member of or the liaison to Acton 2020. We have their charge here, Phase 3 Implementation Committee. We are at 2020. I think Selby had talked about updating the plan to make it a 2030 plan by just doing edits, basically, without going through the full process again. But I think maybe I should talk to Selby, and we ought to update this charge and bring it back to the board.
Okay, so we'll come back to the next meeting with some updates on these.
Yeah,
John?
the level, I don't know about the level of urgency for next meeting, but I think as soon as we're ready for any of these,
Yeah.
we can get working on as soon as possible.
Okay, Veteran Service Intermunicipal Agreement.
Thank you. As discussed at a few previous meetings of the board, I've been working with the town administrator, Brian Ferrara, to put together a proposal for a combined Veterans Services Program that would provide services to Acton and Boxborough. I presented the terms to this board a week and a half ago, and then I was at the Finance Committee last week, and they provided some good feedback, but overall we're supportive of the terms, and the town of Boxborough, I believe, has already approved the terms. So I'm just seeking your approval to implement this intermunicipal agreement, and I'd like to have it be effective for July 1st if you're inclined to do so.
Is there a motion?
I move to approve the draft intermunicipal agreement between Acton and Boxborough for the Veteran Services.
Is there a second?
Yeah, I'll second it.
Okay, motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? All
Yeah.
those in favor?
I'd like to make one comment. I'm reassured by the fact that this does have a renewal date. Is any of you that have had the opportunity to work with Jim McCrae, you know that he's a very diligent and a great individual. I had the pleasure of sharing an office with him for a number of years. And when he came here, there were very few Acton veterans identified and very few services being provided. He went out and found the people that needed those services, and they deserved the services, and he got them to them. And I think he will do the same thing in Boxborough. So the fact that, earlier discussion we talked about how, well, there's only like one person receiving benefits in Boxborough. I think you can rest assured that Jim will find more people. And people who deserve these services will certainly get them. And that's going to change the mix and the cost to the town and the amount of his time. So I'm reassured that we can look at this thing from time to time and adjust the split between Acton and Boxborough as far as the costs go. But certainly in favor of it, certainly in favor of getting services to the veterans, and I'll be interested to see how Jim can beat the bushes and find lots of veterans. Thank you.
Okay, motion made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone abstaining? Voting no. Motion carries unanimously. Okay, board and committee reappointments. The following members have responded positively to express their willingness to serve another term on their respective committees, boards, commission. Acton 2020 Phase 3 Implementation Committee, Ann Corcoran, Associate. Acton Community Housing Corporation, Lara Plascon and Robert Van Meter. Acton Nursing Service Advisory Committee, Charlie Cadillac, Ellen Feinsan, Adrian Hancock, Florence Ross, Jean Lane. Board of Appeals, Ken Kozik. Board of Health, Mark Conaby and William McGinnis. Cable Advisory Committee, Oleg Valinsky and Terrence Lobo. Cemetery Commission, William Clower. Commission on Disabilities, Leslie Johnson and Joan Burrows, Associate. Community Preservation Committee, Bill Ellsbury and Carolyn Kirkpatrick. Conservation Commission, Amy Green, James Coleman, and Tim McKinnon. Council on Aging, Alma Sandman and Michael Chautan. And Ann Corcoran and Lori Cooney. Design Review Board, Holly Ben Joseph. Dog Park Committee, Tom Gillespie, Mike Perry, Claire Siska, Karen Martin, and Fred Kinch. Economic Development Committee, David Dendrickson. Green Advisory Board, Dennis Loria and Stephen Lowe. Historic District Commission, Ronald Reagan and David Shoemaker. Historical Commission, William Dixon. Land Stewardship Committee, Bruce Rackman, John Waddlington, Joseph Holmes, Gary Kilpatrick, Associate, Nan Millette, Associate, Philip Keys, Associate, Andy Gatesman, Associate, Joshua Haynes, Associate, Sherman Smith, Associate, Todd Tiskiris, Associate, James Salmon, Associate, Jason Temple, Associate. Planning Board, Ray Jacoby and Derek Chin. Volunteer Coordinating Committee, Gregory Hutchins, Hartley Millette, and Wang Kong. Water Resource Advisory Committee, Barry Rosen. Any discussion? Barry?
I know it didn't go before the VCC apparently, but there is another committee appointment that the select persons really have to appoint since his term expires July 1. And part of the Water District, there's a committee called the Waterland Management Committee, which is a mandatory committee to the water commissioners. 3 members are appointed by the water commissioners. 1 member is appointed by the moderator, and 1 member is appointed by the select persons. And the current one is Paul Malshody, whose term will expire, or new term is supposed to begin July 1. It's important that the board reappoint Paul Malshody very soon because there are now 2, there's still a quorum, but there are 5 persons. 2 of them had to resign. I'm one of the persons that had to resign since I can't report to myself. So I have left the Water Land Management Committee. Another person, Greta, got married and moved out of Acton, so she's not permitted to serve. So there are now 2 members of the Water Land Management Committee. I don't know if you still can do that, but to act on Paul Malshody as soon as you can, so they will have at least a quota to rebuild themselves. By the way, I should add, it hasn't published yet, the minutes haven't been reviewed, but the Water Land Management Committee has been asked by the commissioners to work with the Water Resources Advisory Committee of the town, which, once they rebuild themselves, I think they're going to do that. Thank you very much.
Peter?
Yeah, I'm not, everything sounds fine, but I'm not sure we should appoint somebody that hasn't really contacted us to express an interest. So, I mean, I think people are going to hold over if their term expires, and we're meeting July 1st anyway. I would ask that Lisa contact him and confirm that that person wishes to be reappointed, and then we can appoint them July 1st.
Okay. So for the rest of these, is there?
Yeah, I'll move that we appoint all these great volunteers to various committees as read.
Is there a second? Motion made and seconded. Any further David?
No.
Oh, any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries.
Motion to adjourn?
Yes.
I'll second.
Motion made and seconded to adjourn. All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Thank you all.